What I find over and over and over is that whatever you believe your superpower is also your kryptonite and vice versa. It's this duality of your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, and your greatest weakness with proper training and awareness and understanding can become your greatest strength. And I've yet to find a circumstance where that doesn't become true.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it is my pleasure to have Zack Arnold with us. Zack is an award-winning Hollywood editor and producer with notable credits that include Cobra Kai, Empire, Burn Notice, and Glee. He's also a documentary director of Go Far, the Christopher Rush story. He's a career coach, a two-time American Ninja Warrior, and the creator of the Optimize Yourself program and podcast. Zack, it's so great to have you on the show.
I can't literally imagine a better fit for the Optimize Yourself podcast than the Get Yourself Optimized podcast. Seems like you and I have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we're kindred spirits, I think.
Well, I'm very excited to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
So let's start by how the heck did you end up being so focused on optimizing yourself and getting into the Hollywood scene and everything? There must be a great origin story there.
Yeah, so there's actually a multitude of origin stories. We could probably do an entire episode on each of them, but I'll do my best to keep it short and edit it down, so to speak. See what I did there? The original origin story for my interest in filmmaking and editing goes all the way back to when I was about 9 years old. And this was back in the days of VHS players and camcorders that you have to like hold on the top of your shoulder. And my older brother had come home with a VHS camcorder and said, let's run around the house and make a movie. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds fun. So we spent the entire weekend chasing each other with like Nintendo Duck Hunt guns and just kind of putting all this stuff together. And we spent the entire weekend, 12 to 14 hour days in the middle of summer, absolutely miserable, hated the process. And he showed me what we had, and it was like 7 minutes long. And I'm like, seriously? We did all this work and this is all we got? Hated the process. 2 weeks later, he comes back and he shows me the exact same thing, but he had scored it with the music from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And my jaw literally drops. And I said, whatever you did is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Show me how you did that. And at the time, it was two VHS players connected to each other with a cassette recorder connected, and you hit play and play on your main VHS and on your cassette recorder to dub the picture with the music. I'm like, this is the coolest thing that I've ever seen. It's better than porn. Teach me. So I spent years and years literally shooting everything that I possibly could, shooting it out of order and making it random because I loved the process of putting it together. I didn't realize at the time that was not only a thing, but it was a profession. It was just my obsession. That's all that I did. I would take movies that I loved and I would create highlight reels and compilation reels of my funniest scenes or best action scenes until I realized at a certain point, this is actually a skill and it's a profession. So from there, I went to college at the University of Michigan, studied film theory and film studies. So I spent a lot more time watching old Russian films and writing papers about them than I did actually making films. But I learned all about the importance of story and structure. And during all of the breaks between classes, nights, weekends, summers, I was learning the editing software and I was taking on side gigs to learn how to edit, which then brought me literally 6 days after graduation to landing my first job in Los Angeles in the industry, and started working my way up from an assistant editor at a trailer house to an editor at that trailer house to freelance editing to having my first feature film editing job maybe 3 years out of school, which is pretty unheard of in our industry. And at the time, I considered myself a machine. I could work 20 hours a day and do whatever it took, and I was just going to deliver whatever level I needed to move my career forwards until I realized, oh, so that's not only not sustainable, the human body and the human brain can't sustain that level of work, specifically creative work. And I completely and totally crashed and had probably the worst of what has now become many scenarios where I dealt with the trifecta of massive anxiety, depression, and complete and total burnout. And it was at that time I kind of had my first realization that in order to achieve my goals, I just can't move forwards and push through and live like the hashtag hustle culture 24/7. I'm going to have to find a more sustainable way to do it. At the time, I had no idea that I was already starting the Optimize Yourself program, because this was years before I turned it into something. But I started looking into standing desks and how can I eat better nutrition so I can be creative for longer, and how do I restructure my days. And it was probably, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 years of just my own personal trial and error until I realized that I was onto something. Because a lot of my colleagues were coming to me saying, how is it that you're, number one, getting such a fast escalation in your career of the credits in the studios you're working with? But frankly, you're also in really good shape. And most people that work in post-production and editing or any kind of knowledge work, as they get older, they get heavier, they get more lethargic, they've got aches and pains. And I appear to be getting younger instead of older. So people started to ask me, and I'm like, well, maybe this is a thing. So I started a podcast, which at the time was called Fitness in Post. Instead of Fix It in Post, now it's time to fitness in post. How do I combine exercise and working in post-production? And that started kind of an organic movement, so to speak, in my sector of the industry, where people realized that your health and your career are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to choose one or the other. And in fact, if you want to improve your career, improving your health is a necessary part of that process. But what I heard people say all the time, and it drove me crazy, is, well, I don't have time to focus on my health, or I can't afford it. It's really expensive. And then in the next Facebook post, they would say, hey, I just spent $7,000 on this new RAID array. I'm optimizing my throughput and my bandwidth for editing footage. I'm like, you guys are optimizing the wrong thing. You're trying to optimize your hard drive space. You're trying to optimize your internet speeds, your workflows. What if you optimized yourself? Ding! Ooh, there's an idea. And from there, I transitioned and rebranded from Fitness in Post, which was a very, very tiny niche, to a much broader niche, which, as I'm sure you can attest to because you have a very similar name, gives you carte blanche to kind of talk about anything. Instead of just fitness for editors, I could talk about any subject that I wanted within the framework of it's about becoming better today than you were yesterday. And that facet could be career, it could be productivity, it could be time management, could be health, could be sleep. I kind of like all of it. I'm pretty massive ADHD in the sense that I can't just do one thing, and I love a broad range of topics. So Optimize Yourself was the perfect umbrella for me to essentially talk about anything, share my own personal stories, my vulnerabilities, the challenges that I faced, and helping other thinkers, artists, creative overcome all of the same challenges so they can design a more productive, balanced, and fulfilling life.
You know, we have a similar trajectory in that one sense than that. I started my podcast with a different name as well. It was The Optimized Geek. And one of my coaches told me that that wasn't a great name for people who didn't self-identify as a geek. So I changed it to Get Yourself Optimized a couple years ago. I rebranded.
Now, clearly, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the name, so much so that we're dangerously close to a trademark battle, but luckily we're not. So,
yes, I'm all love and light, so there won't be any.
But the great thing is, with a name like this, if you were to look at your guests and the subjects that you talk about, very different. Really interesting and very different ways to approach what it means to optimize yourself. But you and I both have the freedom to talk about whatever is important to us, as long as it's under the guise of we are improving the quality of our life. And I love having that broad ability to kind of sort of talk about anything.
Me too. So my latest bent has been on spirituality. A couple of years ago, I had a spiritual awakening that has been really life-changing. And so now I have a lot of psychic mediums on the show, and I have all these spiritual people. And if you look a couple years prior to that, it was mostly biohackers, Dave Asprey and JG Virgin and all these folks. And yeah, by the way, since you mentioned ADHD, I recently interviewed Dr. Ned Hallowell, and he is amazing. He is such a world expert on ADHD. Have you interviewed him yet?
I have not, but definitely if there's room to talk about doing a mutual introduction, anybody that I can bring in to help creatives understand how their brain works and how ADHD can be harnessed as a superpower instead of their kryptonite, that's the area that I really specialize in. I cover a lot of different areas, but the majority of people that gravitate to me, because that's the energy that I put out there, are people that struggle with their creativity and struggle with attention. But once you learn how to better manage it and understand it, it can easily become your superpower. So anybody that I can bring to my community that understands that, I would love to.
I love that you see that as a superpower, because it really is. In fact, it was evolutionarily selected for. If you imagine back to the times of the hunters and gatherers, there was a third type, and those were the spotters. And the spotters would keep the tribe alive. If the herd was on the move and their food supply was just about to leave, they would notice it first. If a tribe was going to sneak up on them in the middle of the night and murder them all, the spotters would be the first to notice that. And that's somebody now labeled as having a quote unquote disorder.
Yeah, amazing how that works, right? How our circumstances can change the way that we label something. What I have found both through my own exploration and now working with thousands of students on 6 different continents. And I've yet to disprove this theory. And you've talked to a lot more experts than I have. So maybe somebody else can disprove this. But what I find over and over and over is that whatever you believe your superpower is also your kryptonite and vice versa. It's this duality of your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, and your greatest weakness with proper training and awareness and understanding can become your greatest strength. And I've yet to find a circumstance where that doesn't become true. And for me, my ability to parse through immense amounts of random information and distill them down to a very succinct story, that's what I do as an editor. That's also now what I do as a career coach, or as I more authentically say, a career therapist. Because a lot of people that are making this career or life transitions, there's a lot of underlying therapy beyond just updating a resume or how do I write an outreach email. There's a lot of deeper stuff. And I find that my ability to parse out all these things and have the ability to focus intensely can be a superpower, but there are still many of contexts where it is very much a kryptonite as far as just basically living like a quote unquote normal human being and paying my bills and doing my laundry and grocery shopping. And then I just, a lot of times, even to this day, I'm just kind of a disorganized mess, and the good comes with the bad and the bad comes with the good. And learning how to find the balance between those two things is kind of the lifelong work that I have in front of me.
Yeah, we're all a work in progress.
Aren't we? Yes.
Now, one thing I want to mention to you about Ned, his take on ADHD, because he truly is one of the leaders in the world. He's written all these books, like I don't know how many, at least 5 or 10, done all this research and everything. He says that people with ADHD have an overabundance in attention, not a lack of attention. And he equates it to having a Ferrari engine, but bicycle brakes.
I think that's a really, really good analogy. And I learned something similar as well through this journey. It all started with, and this was years ago, going back to that first bout of major anxiety, depression, and burnout, meeting with an integrative doctor who now 17 years later is still my integrative physician and a very close friend of mine. And he said, describe to me what it feels like for you any given day. When you're working on a project, you have these ideas. And I said, imagine that I have a flywheel right here, and it's going like this 24 hours a day, and I cannot stop it at any time. He's like, that makes a whole lot of sense. So then he described the process of, at the time, it was medicating just to get started. I haven't been on any ADHD medication for probably 15, 16 years. But he said, I want to start by trying some medication to see how you react to it. And if I remember, it was Adderall or Adderall XR. And immediately within days, I was thinking to myself, this is how regular people live. I paid my bills, I did the dishes, I did my laundry, and it was easy. And I described that to me. He's like, that's a pretty surefire sign that you probably have some form of ADHD. And he has described to me that Adderall is actually a stimulant. I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Why would you give me a stimulant if I feel like I'm super hyper anxious? He's like, the problem is actually that your brain is moving slower and you need the stimulant to level you off. And it's the same kind of duality or paradox that you're talking about, where somebody with ADHD is not a lack of attention. It's the ability to hyper focus. The challenge is being able to hyper focus in multiple areas at the same time and do it consistently, right? So it's either, the thing that I hear the most commonly from my students is one of two things. Either I never get anything done and I feel like a scatterbrained mess, or I will focus on one project for 16 hours a day, forget to eat, forget to sleep, forget to drink water. And it's the only thing that I can focus on, and I can't spread that focus out over a wider range of things that are important to me. So yeah, it's not a lack of attention. It's too much of it. It's an inability to properly manage the attention that I have found. I mean, I'm not the world's foremost expert, but from my experience, it's more about the inability to properly manage it.
Amazing. So I'm happy to make that introduction to Ned.
Yeah, I would love that. That'd be great. He sounds like the perfect fit for everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. And when you were talking about these different thoughts that are happening at once, it reminded me of an experience I had 15 years ago. Quite an experience I'll never forget. I was practicing mindfulness meditation while I was trying to get some sleep. And my mind was racing. It was really hard to sleep. It was really late. I wasn't feeling well, and I just couldn't stop my mind racing. So I'm like, oh, okay, I took some workshops on mindfulness meditation. I'm going to try that. And the most amazing thing happened. I started to focus in on the mindfulness. I don't know how to describe it. It just, as I focused in, I could discern all the thoughts that were happening simultaneously. And I had, I don't know, 7 or 6 or whatever thoughts at once that I could discern and slowly quiet down. It's like peeling a banana. Like, okay, here's one peel or one part of the peel, and I'm taking that off. That was one thought. Now I'm down to 6. And then another one. Now I'm down to 5. Now I'm down to 4. So I quieted each of those thoughts one at a time until there was one which was a really not annoying, but it's one of those kinds of songs that you can't get out of your head once it's in there, like Baby Shark. But it was a Britney Spears song. And for the life of me, I could not get that particular thought to quiet down and go away. So I ended up eventually falling asleep. But wow, what a cool experience to have that awareness of multiple thoughts happening simultaneously. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything quite like that.
I've very much experienced something similar and done a lot of mindfulness meditation practice as well, just to, again, better understand how my thought process works and how to make sure that I'm managing it and it's not managing me. And this kind of larger idea of you are not your thoughts to me was a really important realization during this process. And I'm totally going to steal this analogy because it's not mine at all. But for me, the best metaphor for how your thoughts work and how to better manage them and this idea of being more mindful actually comes from the training that I did with the Headspace app. And I don't even know if it does it this way anymore because it was the very, very early days of Headspace when it was only at Andy Puddicombe and there were only like 3 paths. And now they've got like 578,000 different versions of meditation. But essentially, it was this idea of the blue sky, where if you imagine that there's a bunch of clouds in the sky, each of those clouds is a passing thought, but the blue sky is always there. The blue sky is the sense of clarity, the sense of self. And you often, if ever, cannot even see the blue sky because it's covered with all these clouds, i.e., all of these thoughts. But when you realize the blue sky is always there and you're just letting the clouds pass, all of a sudden you realize I have more control over the thoughts that are coming in and out, and I don't have to let them rule my thoughts, my emotions, and my behavior. So that was a really big realization for me as well.
That's awesome. A related realization I had was in India on a Tony Robbins Platinum Partner trip. What happened was I learned from the monks at this, not ashram, but they were like at this oneness temple, and they were brought in this hotel that was a palace on these islands called Udaipur. And the monks explained that you are not your thoughts, you're not your body. You have thoughts, you have a body. You are like a receiver, like an FM, like radio receiver. And the thoughts that come in are not yours. They're not even your thoughts. Not only are you not your thoughts, but those thoughts don't belong to you. So you are like a blank slate and stuff just comes in. And so then I came to realize over much work on myself spiritually that based on the vibration I'm at, I'm tuned into different radio stations. If I'm at a low vibration, I'm feeling tired, exhausted, frustrated, angry, whatever, then I'm tuned into some really crappy radio stations. And those radio stations that are speaking into my consciousness are saying self-defeating thoughts, self-deprecating thoughts, critical thoughts, judgmental thoughts. And if I work on even just a 2-minute little breathing exercise to increase my vibration, or just ask God to please increase my vibration. Because this is a crazy thing. Not crazy. Crazy is not the right word. This is an amazing thing that you can do, is just ask God, and stuff happens on the physical realm. instantly. And case in point, I was wearing one of those continuous glucose monitors as part of a 42-day metabolic reset, and I lost, like, I don't know, 5% body fat in those 42 days. Got all the way down to 14%.
Wow, good for you.
Amazing. Yeah. But I wore a continuous glucose monitor that whole time. And there were days and nights where I would crash. The score would be really low. I'd be well into the red zone on the Freestyle Libra device. And I remember one night it was late and I was really tired, and I saw that I was well into the danger zone, and my numerical score was really low, like dangerously low. And I was so tired, I didn't want to get up and try and find some food or whatever. I just prayed. I asked God to please increase my my blood sugar level, and I kid you not, it increased. It got back into the black. I didn't consume anything. I just prayed.
Yeah, and that's pretty astounding. I mean, if you go back to the things you had mentioned about, well, if I can accept that I am not my thoughts, or if I can accept that I am not my body, well, then the bigger question comes up, which I think is probably one of the most universal questions amongst all religions and spiritualities and faiths. Well, then who am I? Right? Because if I'm not my thoughts or my body or anything else, then who am I really? And that's where the question gets really, really challenging.
It depends on how you look at it. It could be either really challenging and scary and kind of an ego death, or it could just simply be a knowing, because you knew already and you just forgot. Like, it's the veil of forgetting that we go through when we're born. Everything is all planned out by us before we get here, and then we forget that we did that. So, because who wants to see a movie where you've read the Wikipedia article ahead of time? So asking God for a higher vibration is a great way to raise your vibration, and then you get wholly different, little pun there, wholly different thoughts that come in. You don't get those intrusive, dark thoughts. You get beautiful, inspired intuition. It's amazing. Here's the exercise that was downloaded to me from above, and it's super simple. I don't know if you have any similar kind of exercises that you do, but I just simply imagine from my heart center a big angelic golden explosion of light that sends any kind of negative energies or entities or energetic cords or anything like that back to their source, to the infinite light, to what in Hebrew is referred to as Ein Sof, the endless, for transformation. So then it takes like 2 seconds. I don't have to do a whole long convoluted process. It just takes a couple seconds. I just imagine it happening, and I feel it. I feel it happened. And then I'm clear. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. And if a negative thought comes in at some point during the day, I'll just immediately do that. I'll do that 2-second thing. And those thoughts and the exact point of origin of those thoughts, I send to the infinite light.
I love that. And it reminded me of relatively similar exercise, maybe a little bit more practical and less on the spiritual side. But in this, I think it demonstrates equally well as yours does, just the power the human mind has over the quality and perception of our lives. But it reminded me of an exercise that I learned in my martial arts training when I was younger, that I now have used with the students that I have. A subsect of the Optimize Yourself community is I have a whole group of students that are learning how to become Spartans, become Spartan racers, and get physically and mentally in shape to be able to run Spartan races and obstacle courses. And there's an exercise that I learned years ago that I tested with them, and it's called a black and white meditation. Something that I learned is a way to really bring a positive sense of energy to you very, very quickly if you're either pessimistic or fearful. And essentially all you do, it's just a mindfulness breathing exercise. It's very, very simple. And there's 2 components to it. Whenever you're breathing in through your nose, white, positive light and energy. And when you're exhaling, you imagine all of the black negativity inside you going out your mouth and going back out into the world. And the practicality of the exercise was that we were on the beach And it wasn't cold. I mean, we're in, California, so it wasn't that cold, but it was probably in the 50s and it was really windy and you're next to the water and people were very, very uncomfortable. And they were all sitting there shivering in their coats. And I said, we're going to sit down. We're talking 10 feet away from the tide. I said, we're going to sit in the sand and we're going to do a breathing exercise. Like, we can't sit down and do a breathing exercise. And like, everybody just sit down, get comfortable. And I walked them through this exercise. And 5 minutes later, everybody was warm. Same wind, same air temperature, same situation, but they were astounded how just changing the energy coming in and going out and visualizing it, they're like, it's amazing. It feels like it's 75 degrees right now. That is the power of the perception of your mind.
Yeah. Well, that you have the opportunity to create your own reality. Well, co-create it. You're not creating it by yourself. Everything happens in collaboration with the creator. You can't take your next breath without him. But if you step into that knowing and that power, it's not just about you're controlling your physiology. You're controlling the universe, the world. It's like your little slice of the multiverse. You're the pilot of that, and you're taking it in a different direction.
I'm a big fan of the idea of creating your own reality and taking control of that. And the angle that I use is a little bit less of a faith-based or a spiritual one, but it comes from the perspective of the vast majority of people that I work with work in creative industries. A lot of them work in the entertainment industry, writers, editors, directors, similar to the work that I do. And they're all really, really good at storytelling. They all understand story structure, how to create compelling fictional characters, and they understand the basics of the hero's journey. You have somebody that's in an ordinary world that has a call to adventure. They have to step outside their ordinary world. And what we watch, the reason we watch movies, we read stories, we listen to stories, is because we want to see somebody overcome obstacles to achieve their goals. And they're all great at doing that for others or for mass audiences. What I help them do is take those components, but now modify it to fit your own story and your own life. And that's one of those moments they're like, oh my God, it never even occurred to me. I'm on my own hero's journey and I'm dealing with all the same benchmarks in the story structure, but I've never seen it that way because when you're in it, you don't have the objectivity. So this idea of creating your own reality, I believe that we can be our own storytellers. Doesn't mean it's all going to work out exactly the way that we want, when we want it. But I think what happens, and this happens with my students a lot, and I'm sure that you can relate to this too on the spiritual path, is that when we have this preconceived notion of this is the reality or the universe we want to create, and I want it to happen by this time and it doesn't, you're like, oh, I've deviated off the path. And sometimes you have to realize, no, actually, this is the path. What you think isn't the path actually is. And it's a part of your story that you didn't realize was actually necessary. Those obstacles, those failures, they can either be failures and you went off the path and things are wrong, or maybe these were put here for your benefit, for you to get stronger and have more perspective. So when you look at the obstacles and the challenges and all of the things in your way as, all right, well, this was put here for a reason, and I can either complain about it or I can use it as a learning experience for me to get stronger. Well, then great. I guess this is just what's been put in front of me. And it makes it a lot easier to manage just the vast chaos that life can become at any given moment. And I had an interesting experience just recently going through this where I certainly did not ask for this in the universe, but the universe decided it was time for me to deal with this. My father got very, very gravely ill. He's in his 80s now, and my mom is, I think actually today is her birthday. And I'm not even sure I'm going to get this right, but I think she's 80 today, either 79 or 80. The point being, that I got a call about a month ago, you got to get a plane ticket. You need to be here tomorrow. And it came during a really intense, busy period with my business and my company enrolling students for an entirely new semester. So if I'd picked the 1 week of the 52-week calendar to say this would be the worst time to call me to drop my life and have to fly home, this would be the one, that's when I got the call. But I'm like, all right, this is my new reality right now. I can't do anything about it. I'm certainly not going to say, sorry, too busy. So that was my new reality and I had to manage it. And I even had a conversation with my mom about 2 or 3 days in, because that was just the beginning I could literally write an entire movie about the chaos that this 2 weeks was. And at one point she looked at me and she's like, where did this attitude of yours come from? I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're just so calm. You're just like, whatever happens, happens, and we're going to make it work and we're just going to deal with it. She's like, this isn't you. I'm like, well, this is the new version of me because I've realized that I can either complain about this and think about how this is not where I was supposed to be this week, or I accept this is my reality and what positive things can I take from a very, very negative and stressful situation. And she was like with a totally different person. She's like, I don't even recognize you right now, in a good way. So that was just kind of the practice in real life of me having to kind of put my money where my mouth is.
A great question that I learned from Ephraim Olszewski, a friend of mine who has been on this podcast. He asks his kids, are you complaining or are you creating? What a difference that question can make for somebody who's in the thick of they're wallowing in misery at the moment, complaining about something, and to have that perspective shift, like, oh, I could do one or the other. Which one do I want to do? A great example he gave of this was his son was complaining and having a tantrum in the back seat of the car while they were driving to the gym, he and his wife and the daughter as well. He shows his phone. The tantrum was about he left his iPad at home, the boy, and he wanted them to turn around and go back and get it. And they were already half of the way there. So he said no, and the boy went into a meltdown. He asks his son, are you complaining or are you creating? And as he's saying that, he's kind of motioning with his cell phone, with his iPhone. And the boy realizes, oh, can I borrow your iPhone while you guys are working out in the playroom? Well, yes, you can. Great example of that.
Yeah, I love that. I don't have the same kind of question, but I have a similar exercise that I use with my kids. And it sounds like he was probably a little bit younger, but my son is now 13 and my daughter is going to be 11. So I basically, for all intents and purposes, have two teenagers in my house right now. So there's lots of complaining and whining and moping and, all the kind of usual stuff. And whenever they get really negative or complaining about something or whatever it is, the question I always ask them, and it drives them crazy, is this an effective use of your energy right now? So let's say we're stuck in traffic and we're late. Oh, we're going to be late for this thing. And I tell them, like, okay, so is this an effective use of your energy? What do you mean? Can I change the traffic? Can I do anything about the fact that we might end up being 5 minutes late? Well, no. All right. So then who do you want to be when we show up to this event? Do you want to be crabby and irritable? And the fact that you're 5 whole minutes late, which nobody cares about but you're going to walk into that space a completely different person with a different energy, and you're going to put that negative energy out there, and people are going to absorb that. Is this an effective use of your energy right now? No. And then that kind of changes the conversation. But a question that I always ask myself, because I'm human and I get into these spirals just like anybody else. And this is also a conversation that I'll have with my wife too when we get kind of in the middle of the day-to-day complaints and issues. Is this going to matter in 5 years? Whatever this decision is that we're debating, will we remember it and will it matter in 5 years? And there are some things that fit into that category where whatever the decision is, if it's a matter of, let's say, for example, we're arguing over where my son's going to go to college. We're not at that point yet, but I'll project a little bit into the future. Will this decision matter in 5 years? Absolutely, it will matter. So this is a good, effective use of our energy to find the best option to make sure we have the best education for our son, right? If he's going to miss one homework assignment for some class in 7th grade that really doesn't affect his grade, is this going to matter in 5 years? Are we even do you remember when he was in 2nd grade and we had the same problem? No, I don't remember that happening. Exactly. It's not important enough to even remember because it didn't change the trajectory or the course of anybody's life. So it's not going to matter in 5 years. Why are we wasting our energy?
So true. Yeah. Another thing I want to share with you that I want to get your take on, you were talking about the hero's journey. So I'm guessing you're a fan of Joseph Campbell.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, do you know Chris Vogler, the writer of a book called The Writer's Journey, which is essentially taking Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and putting it into a practical framework if you're an author or you're a writer. So that could be somebody that could be a good fit for you and your audience as well. But I just had him on recently talking about the writer's journey, which is the kind of the updated version of the hero's journey. But yes, go on.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll check him out. So I learned this from Jonathan Fields, who was amazing. And he was sharing his journey of how He was battling with tinnitus. He couldn't get any kind of reprieve from it. It just was incessant. Made him like suicidal, even suicidal ideation. And he found this quote that was really comforting, and he used mindfulness meditation as well, and it really helped him to find himself and find peace. So here's the quote that he shared. It is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Remember, this is Joseph Campbell's quote. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. The very cave you are afraid to enter turns out to be the source of what you are looking for. The damned thing in the cave that was so dreaded has become the center. You find the jewel and it draws you off. So in other words, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was the title of a much more modern work that's based on a lot of more ancient works would be Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way. Right? It's like I said, it's this idea that you have this preconceived notion, this is the path that I'm on and this is the destination. And you deviate, or your perception is that you've deviated and you've ended up in the wrong place because something stopped you or got in your way. The obstacle is the way, right? So the treasure in the cave that you were dreading or avoiding or whatever that might be, that ends up being the thing that changes everything. So that's why I'm such a big proponent. Essentially, I've designed my life in such a way that I have so many problems in it that I enjoy solving that I'm not worried about when the problems come to me. Right. So this idea of one of the reasons that I chose to pursue American Ninja Warrior is that it's the perfect metaphor for life. And the reason that people watch that show is you see everyday people confronting very physical obstacles paired with the story of the real obstacles they have in life. So it's not about watching somebody that overcame cancer jump on a rope and go on a platform. It's about seeing them visually overcoming an obstacle that is metaphorical to whatever their real journey is. So I put as many obstacles in my life as possible so that when obstacles choose me, I'm prepared. Right. So this pursuit of I want an easier life and I want to eliminate as many obstacles and problems and I just want things to be easy. I believe that's the worst possible way to design your life. You're never going to eliminate all of the problems. And frankly, the few that get close to doing that, they all say the same thing. My life is boring and comfortable, and I'm tired of being comfortable and I want a challenge. So if I know my life is going to be filled with nothing but problems and obstacles, I want to choose the ones that I love solving and that I love overcoming. That to me is where you find fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. Well, what if you already did that? What if you did that before you incarnated, which is the concept of soul contracts? You wrote the script, you co-created your reality, and then you stepped into it, and then you forgot it because of the veil of forgetting. That's something I believe in wholeheartedly, that we chose this journey and we can change it even though we wrote it, because there are many versions of the movie script that we wrote as well. And so that's called timeline jumping. You can go to another version of the script. Like, oh, this one suits me better to where I'm at vibrationally now. With faith and trust and positive expectancy, boom, there you are in a new timeline.
I love it. And now I'm going to, because I too am a podcaster, I'm going to hijack your podcast for a second and ask you a question. It sounds like you're a little bit certainly further along in the spiritual side of the journey than perhaps even I am. And one of the questions that I often have just about life and reality and existence in general is that there's got to be something deeper and more profound about intuition than I understand right now. And kind of my general hypothesis has been, with as strong as intuition is, there has to be a reason that I have such a strong intuition. And one of them is, well, maybe I've already done this, or I've already done something similar to this. And like you said, I've just forgotten. So you talked about this a little bit earlier, but how do you take all of the spirituality and the journey that you've been on and specifically frame and explain what we consider to be intuition?
Yeah. So my understanding of intuition is that it's the still small voice whispering into our consciousness. It's God, it's our guides, our angels, our higher self, the unseen support team that is guiding us. So something will just pop into your head out of the blue. That's a good sign of intuition. Like, there are three core attributes of intuition I learned. I was watching a documentary, and this was the explanation he gave, that there are three attributes to intuition. One is it comes in unexpected. Two, it comes in emotionally charged neutral. There's no anxiety or fear or excitement or anything. It's just simply is. And then the third is that it doesn't jump to another thought and then another thought. Like normally you think of one thing and then it leads to another, and 10 thoughts later you're remembering you need to pick up milk at the store. It just stays there. It stays put. So those are the three main attributes that will help you discern intuition from just your own thoughts. There's a great book. I interviewed the author of it. If you're willing to go a little outside your comfort zone and have a guest who's a famous psychic medium, Echo Bodine wrote the book A Still Small Voice, The Psychic's Guide to Awakening Intuition. Really good book. I've read the whole thing. It's very helpful. Everyone is psychic. Everyone's intuitive as well, and they're different things. Psychic and intuitive are different. But once you start tapping into your intuition more and more, then you realize how much you are guided and you're just being carried down the river. You don't have to swim it anymore. It's like that what we talked about earlier about hashtag hustle kind of lifestyle. It's the opposite of that. It's amazing. It changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even though I don't have nearly as specific a framework or the vocabulary to talk about intuition as maybe your other guests have, but the one consistent thing that I found, which kind of dovetails back to this idea, if you're highly creative, highly artistic, managing the thoughts is very challenging, ADHD, all these things that we've already talked about. One of the most important things that I've learned to develop is my intuition, because I get 1.5 million ideas every day. And I built analog systems, digital systems to capture those ideas, to organize those ideas. But what I've learned how to do is temper my excitement to execute things and go down all these rabbit holes until my intuition says it's time. And the number one criteria is it just doesn't go away. Oh, I've got an idea for this product or this opt-in guide, or I should write this newsletter. 9 times out of 10, the next week I'm like, wait, what was that idea? I even wrote it down. Well, it must not have been that important. But then if there's something that I can't get out of my head, and like you said, it doesn't change, it doesn't go anywhere, it's not emotionally charged, but it keeps saying, this is where to focus next. This is the thing you need to execute. I've learned to really trust that, as opposed to, well, logically, I don't know if it makes sense based on this or that or the other thing, or, I've got too many other things going on, I'm too busy. The voice just sits there very calmly saying, this is what you need to focus on next. And learning to trust that intuition has guided me to a lot of places that had I either made rash decisions or used all logic, I probably would have not gone in the direction that I did. Ninja Warrior was one of them. I started watching the show just because my kids were into it. Like, oh, this is so cool. Like, you get to see, athletes and regular moms and dads and everybody conquering these courses. You can do this. Yeah, whatever. Okay, keep watching it. You could do this. That's stupid. I could never do this. And then at the worst of the worst of it was probably the second worst period of depression, anxiety, and burnout that I've ever experienced. This was in late 2017. I call 2017 my lost year. Other than basically rolling out of bed to do the minimum amount of work to make sure that I had a paycheck and I could support my family, I accomplished nothing, and it was a horrible year. But I will never forget this image of me sitting on the couch watching Ninja Warrior, vastly out of shape, very overweight, over 25% body fat. I had a giant bowl of popcorn on my stomach, and in the popcorn bowl was Oreos. So it was Oreos mixed with popcorn, looking at the TV saying, I'm going to do this. That was intuition. There was no logic or reason that said I should be, but my intuition just kept saying, you could do this. You can't do it yet, but you could do this, and this could be you. And that intuition just never stopped. It wasn't incessantly shouting. It wasn't like this limiting belief or this voice. It was just, this is the next stage of your path. Woke up January 1st, 2018. And I said, all right, it's day one of the Ninja Warrior journey. And little did I know what a tremendous impact it would have on the quality of every aspect of my life. But it's because I listened to that voice.
Oh, that is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. And it is such a hallmark of intuition that it is emotionally charged neutral. You didn't have any fear or anxiety arrive with that thought. It's just simply, you can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it never went away.
It's not, you can do this.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that, or it wasn't like, get off your ass and do it. Or it was none of that. It was, like you said, it was just very neutral. It's like, this is something that could be a part of your life and you could be here. And I just kept hearing it and kept hearing it and kept shrugging it off. And and here's where it gets really interesting, is that other people would say it to me. People would say, oh, dude, all this Spartan stuff you're doing, you should totally do American Ninja Warrior. Pfft, nah, I can never get in. That's not for me. Right. So even the outside world was dropping the same hints, and between the intuition and the outside world, eventually I'm like, there's got to be something to this. Like, right. So I figured I'd try it out, and here we are.
I'll tell you, it gets really weird when you start seeing the cracks in the matrix. The glitches show up, like somebody says something that they couldn't have possibly known, and someone else confirms it or repeats it or whatever. These are not coincidences. They're orchestrated from above.
Yeah, I've had that experience a lot lately. It actually happened twice over the course of 2 days, where there was somebody that I hadn't thought about for years. All of a sudden, I thought about them less than 12 hours later, got a message from them. I didn't send anything out there, but I'm just like, there's got to be something to this because it keeps happening.
Yeah, we're all connected. The illusion of separation is an illusion.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah, so fun. Wow, I love this conversation. So you've done American Ninja Warrior twice now.
Now, one caveat I want to throw out there, anybody that's like, ooh, 2-time American Ninja Warrior, I want to watch it. I haven't actually been on the show. I have participated on the course, and I've also been a course obstacle tester, but it's a TV show and not an athletic competition. So the amount of people that they shoot is more than double the amount that actually air on television. So it's just like any other casting call or audition, where they take your story, they couple it with the quality of your run, and they decide who goes on TV and who doesn't. So I know people that have hit buzzers that have never been on TV. I've never hit a buzzer. And frankly, I haven't done very well. So if I were a producer on the show, I probably wouldn't have cast me and put me on the show either. So if anybody's looking for my clip, it doesn't exist yet. It will. Oh, it will exist, but I'm still working towards that kind of last clincher is actually getting on the show. But as far as being in that world, surrounded by that community, I've been on the course 3 or 4 different times. I haven't actually made it to the show yet. So if anybody can't find it, that's why.
I will root for you here in Miami. And I'm sure our listeners will also do the same. That's awesome. Now, one thing, I know we're about out of time here, but I want to share a tool with you, and here, if you've already come across it or utilize it, it pairs very well with intuition, the intuitive hits that come. It's called muscle testing. Are you familiar with it?
Mm-hmm. I'm not. No, it sounds fascinating though.
Oh, it is so amazing and powerful. Another term for it is applied kinesiology. One of the most famous books about it is called Power versus Force by David Hawkins. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
I haven't, but I'm already very intrigued.
So what you do is you check to see if the thought that you had, or the thing that you want to test, is true or not from the perspective of your higher self, from the other side of the veil. And the way you can do that on your own without utilizing another person, because usually muscle testing involves 2 people where somebody is testing you. You hold out your arm straight, and then somebody pushes on your wrist. And if you hold your arm out straight and you resist with the same level of strength and it doesn't go anywhere, okay, that test's strong. If you have that thought or you say that thing and they test you and it tests weak, then your arm kind of falls down. It's like, hey, that's weird. I used the same level of resistance and I couldn't hold my arm up. So that is really powerful. And the way you do it by yourself is you could make an okay kind of sign, and then you put your finger in between the circle from your other hand, and then you like say I'm narrating it for our listener who's not watching the video, and then you push against with that finger the weakest point in the circle where the 2 fingers, or the finger and the thumb. So this is testing strong, and I'm going to think of something that's not true and it tests weak, and it's the same level of force. And you can do this from anywhere or anytime. It's just like, oh, should I buy this food? I don't know if it's going to be healthy for me. Should I buy the supplement, or should I go up to this person that I want to introduce myself to, or whatever. Like, should isn't the right word to use, but would it bring about the, my, I don't know, the most benevolent outcome for me to go and interrupt this person, introduce myself, or whatever the thing is that you want to test. So that can be another tool in your tool chest. You're
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely going to test that.
It's awesome. But read that book or listen to the audio book, Power versus Force, so you get more context around it. It's something I use daily, and it's available to you all the time. Whereas if you're waiting for intuition to arrive, because it does come in unexpected, and you're like, I need, I need an answer here. Do I buy this house or do I let it go? I don't know. Yeah.
I like that. I'm definitely going to put that into practice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been fun. So, and by the way, we have even more things in common I didn't mention. We both went to University of Michigan.
Oh, how about that? I love it.
I have a degree in cellular and molecular biology from U of M. Yep. Go blue.
Much more fascinating than me just watching movies and writing papers.
I don't know about that. Oh, actually, one last quick question before we wrap. Christopher Rush, who is he or was he? Because you created a whole documentary or directed a whole documentary about him.
Yeah, I'll give you the shortest version because I want to be very respectful of your time. But essentially, Christopher is really the beginning of this journey. Like the origin story about making the movies at home and whatnot with my brother, that's one part of the story. But the real origin of Optimize Yourself and all the work that I do was meeting Christopher Rush, who in the shortest package I can give possible was the first quadriplegic to become a licensed scuba diver. And since has basically started an entire industry of helping those with physical disabilities to become licensed scuba divers. But he was a friend of mine at the University of Michigan, and I actually knew very little about him because he was humble to a fault. But when he unfortunately passed away, spoiler alert for anybody that watches the movie, I was at his funeral service and people were talking about everything he'd accomplished, and becoming the first quadriplegic that was a licensed scuba diver was like low on the list of things he accomplished. And I'm like, who in the world was this guy? Like, he has the amount of obstacles that he had to face in his life and how he overcame them, and the mindset and the level of optimism that he had, there must be something to this. And I looked around the church that day and I said, man, his story can't end here. Somebody's going to have to tell his story. It's going to have to be me, isn't it? I'm going to have to be the one. That was way back in 2007. And I had a eulogy written that day. I totally scrapped it. And I went up in front of the entire crowd and I said, I'm just vowing to all of you today, this is not the end of Christopher's story. And I'm going to do my best to share his accomplishments and share his mindsets and the way he approaches his life with the entire world to help others overcome obstacles to achieve their goals. And it's going to be called Go Far because that was a motivational program that he was building to help people set goals, overcome obstacles, focus on the right things, take action, and reflect. And I thought, this is the place to start. And here I am in 2023, now teaching and coaching the Go Far framework that he originated years and years ago. But essentially, I am the person that I am because of the day that I met Christopher. That's the shortest version of what could be a much longer story.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm sure Christopher appreciates your love and support and spreading his message and legacy.
Yes. Well, they're going back to the idea of spirituality and there being a higher power. There have been so many things that have happened along the journey of this film that defy any logic whatsoever, where you just think the project is going to fail. It's time to quit. This isn't going to work out. Boom. You get a message, you get a phone call, whatever it is. We just overcame the next massive obstacle. And I can't explain it consciously, but I know that his energy and he has something to do with continuing the momentum that this project has.
I feel he's in your field.
Yes. Could not agree more.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation and very inspiring. If our listener or viewer wants to work with you, get some coaching, their career, their life, they want to perhaps even do American Ninja Warrior or perhaps work with you on a documentary or something, how do they get in touch?
The simplest place to find me would just be my website, optimizeyourself.me. I'm very easily reachable, just either via the contact form. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm certainly not at influencer level, and I don't have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, but I am reachable via those platforms as well. But anybody that's interested either in coaching or learning to better tell their story, or they want to better organize their time, more effectively use their energy, I could talk about this stuff for days and hours and weeks. And that's basically what I do. So happy to connect with anybody, and I'm very easily reachable and highly responsive.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, listener. Please go out there and work on your body, your soul, your life, your family, your community. Optimize yourself, and then it will change the world around you. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.